I've noticed that a lot of you watch my videos but haven't hit that subscribe button yet. If you enjoy what you're watching, subscribing really helps out, and make sure you don't miss any new content. Thanks for the support! Okay, so I've been an ER nurse for 15 years, but nothing could have prepared me for that morning shift last December. It started like any other 6 a.m. handover. Coffee in hand, listening to night shift wrap up their cases. Then everything went sideways in ways none of us could have imagined. It was supposed to be a routine morning. Dr. Martinez was finishing his overnight, looking forward to handing over to the day team. We had the usual mix of patients, 2 drunks sleeping it off, an elderly woman with pneumonia, and a kid with a broken arm. Standard stuff. The first sign something was different came at 6:23 a.m. Our ambulance radio crackled to life with a tone I'd never heard before. Pure panic in the paramedic's voice. Multiple incoming traumas, mass casualty incident, school bus versus semi on the interstate. ETA 5 minutes, at least 30 pediatric patients. The entire ER froze for exactly 2 seconds. Then training kicked in. Dr. Martinez grabbed the overhead PA. Code black. All available personnel to ER. Code black. In emergency medicine, code black means mass casualty. Something we drill for but pray never happens. Within minutes, the calm ER transformed into organized chaos. Staff appeared from everywhere. Doctors who just finished their shifts, nurses from other floors, even the hospital administrator showed up in scrubs. We cleared every bed, moved stable patients upstairs, and set up triage zones in the hallways. The first ambulance hit our bay doors at 6:28 a.m. Inside was a 12-year-old girl, unconscious, multiple fractures, internal bleeding. Behind her, a stream of ambulances stretched into the darkness, emergency lights painting the pre-dawn sky red and white. They kept coming. 8-year-old with a head injury, 10-year-old in cardiac arrest, 14-year-old with a crushed pelvis. The bus driver with massive chest trauma. Each ambulance brought another nightmare, another child fighting for life. I found myself working on a small boy, couldn't have been more than 9. His blood pressure was crashing and we couldn't find a vein for IV access. Dr. Martinez made the call. Intraosseous line. We had to drill directly into his shin bone to give him fluids. His screams still haunt me. The pediatric surgeon, Dr. Chen, was operating in 2 rooms simultaneously, running between them as she tried to save multiple children at once. The OR board looked like a war zone triage list. Liver lac, room 1. Splenic rupture, room 2. Subdural hematoma, room 3. By 7 a.m., we had 28 children in various states of crisis. The halls were filled with crying parents who'd been woken by phone calls no parent should ever receive. Social workers tried to match children with families while we worked to keep those children alive. The truck driver came in last. He was conscious, covered in glass cuts, repeating over and over. The brakes failed. I couldn't stop. Oh God, the brakes failed. His eyes were vacant, seeing something none of us could. Probably the moment of impact playing on endless loop in his mind. Around 8 a.m., we lost our first patient. Sarah, 13 years old. Multiple trauma, massive internal bleeding. We worked on her for 45 minutes, but her injuries were too severe. Dr. Martinez called it voice cracking. Time of death, 8:17 a.m. The silence that followed was deafening, but we couldn't stop. There were others who needed us. A boy with a punctured lung. Twin sisters, both with head injuries. A girl whose arm was nearly severed. We worked mechanically, moving from crisis to crisis, trying not to think about the small bodies under our hands. The blood bank called. We were running low on O negative. The hospital administrator authorized emergency protocols, calling in donations from 3 other hospitals. Staff members who weren't treating patients began donating blood between shifts. By noon, we had the situation somewhat stabilized. 17 children in critical care, 8 in serious but stable condition, 3 walking wounded, and 2 dead. Sarah and Marcus, age 10, who arrested during emergency surgery. The OR was still running full tilt. Dr. Chen hadn't stopped for 6 hours straight. Her scrubs were soaked through with sweat and blood, but her hands never wavered. She saved 6 lives that morning, including a girl whose aorta was partially severed. The kind of surgery that defines careers. The parents' room was another kind of emergency. Shock, grief, anger, hope, all mixing together in a toxic brew. Some prayed, others screamed, many just sat in stunned silence. Our psychiatric team was there, but how do you counsel someone whose child just left for school and is now fighting for life? Around 2 p.m., we had our third crisis. Tommy, age 11, seemed stable, until he wasn't. Post-traumatic pulmonary embolism. One minute he was talking to his mom about his PlayStation, the next he was coding. We worked on him for 20 minutes. His mother watched the whole thing, refusing to leave. He made it, barely. The media arrived in force. News helicopters circled the hospital like vultures. Reporters tried sneaking in through the ER doors. Our security team, already stretched thin helping with crowd control, had to form a human barrier. The hospital PR team was overwhelmed trying to manage the situation. By evening, we started seeing the secondary emergencies. Parents collapsing from stress. Teachers from the school having panic attacks. First responders coming back with 1,000-yard stares, needing someone to talk to. The ripple effects of trauma spreading through our community like waves. The night shift arrived to find an ER that looked nothing like the one they'd left that morning. Every surface was marked by what had happened. Bloody footprints on the floor, torn packaging from countless supply kits, IV poles standing like silent sentinels next to empty beds. Dr. Martinez never left. 36 hours straight he stayed, monitoring every critical patient. I found him at one point staring at Sarah's empty trauma bay, just standing there. When I touched his shoulder, he jumped like he'd seen a ghost. Maybe he had. The truck driver's toxicology came back clean. Mechanical failure, pure and simple. Wrong place, wrong time. He survived physically, but the last I heard he was in a psychiatric facility. Some burdens are too heavy to carry alone. 3 days later, I was changing the IV on one of our remaining critical patients. Amy, age 12, multiple fractures but fighting hard. She grabbed my hand and asked, "Is everyone else okay?" That's when I lost it. First time I'd cried since it all began. How do you answer that question? A week after the accident, we held a debriefing. The entire ER staff, surgeons, first responders, everyone who was there that morning. People started sharing stories, the impossible saves, the near misses, the moments of pure grace under pressure, and yes, the losses that would stay with us. The hospital installed a memorial in the ER waiting room. 2 small plaques, Sarah and Marcus. Below them, a quote, "In memory of those we lost and in honor of those who fought to save them." Every morning when I walk past, I touch those plaques. A reminder of why we do what we do. 6 months later, we had a reunion. The survivors, their families, the medical team. Watching those kids walk into the hospital cafeteria, some with casts, some with scars, but all alive, was the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. Even the ones in wheelchairs were smiling. The school bus driver came too. He'd been in a coma for 2 weeks but pulled through. When he saw the kids he'd been carrying that morning, he broke down. They surrounded him, hugging him, telling him it wasn't his fault. Healing comes in many forms. That day changed all of us. Some of the staff quit. The weight was too much. Others became even more dedicated. Dr. Martinez now specializes in pediatric trauma. Says he owes it to Sarah and Marcus to save every child he can. Me? I'm still here, still working the ER. Every time we get a trauma call, I feel that December morning in my bones. But I also remember Amy's smile, the sound of children laughing at the reunion, the way our team came together when it mattered most. Because that's what emergency medicine is about. Not just the procedures and protocols, but the human spirit. Both its fragility and its incredible resilience. Sometimes we lose, sometimes we save. but we always try. They say what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. I don't know about that. But I do know that morning showed me the very best and worst of humanity, often in the same moment. And when I look at those plaques in the waiting room, I remember why I chose this path. Because sometimes, in the darkest hours before dawn, when sirens are wailing and children are crying, and everything seems hopeless, you get to be part of a miracle. And that makes all the hard days worth it. I've been a cardiac surgeon for 20 years, but what happened in OR 4 last summer defied everything I knew about medicine. They say doctors shouldn't get emotionally involved, but this one changed everything. It started during a routine bypass surgery. Lisa Chen, 34, mother of 2. Textbook atherosclerosis. We'd done thousands of these procedures. The patient was prepped, anesthetized, and we were just about to make the initial incision when our power went out. Now, hospitals have backup generators for exactly this reason. They're supposed to kick in immediately, but that day, something was different. We had power to the monitors, but the main OR lights were dead. In the dim emergency lighting, I could see my team's eyes above their masks. That mix of concern and determination. "Generator status?" I called out. Our charge nurse was already on the phone. "Primary and secondary generators are both down. Some kind of cascading failure. Engineering's working on it." We had a patient open on our table, literally counting on us to keep her alive. The battery-powered monitors showed stable vitals, but we all knew that could change in seconds. In cardiac surgery, timing is everything. Dr. Wong, my assistant surgeon, was already setting up our battery-powered surgical lights. Not ideal, but workable. We had maybe 3 hours of battery life. Plenty of time for the generators to kick in, we thought. We were wrong. 2 hours into the procedure, halfway through the bypass, all hell broke loose. The patient's pressure dropped dramatically. Then the unthinkable happened. Ventricular fibrillation. Her heart wasn't just stopping, it was going into chaos. Code blue! The call went out automatically, but we were already moving. In the dim light, we started chest compressions. The defibrillator whined as it charged. Clear! The patient's body jerked with the shock. Nothing. That's when our battery-powered lights started failing. One by one, they dimmed and died. We were working by the light of cell phones held by nurses. Have you ever tried to perform cardiac massage in near darkness? It's like trying to defuse a bomb while wearing mittens. The monitor showed asystole, flatline. We'd lost her, but something in me refused to accept it. Continue compressions. I could feel the sweat running down my back, my arms aching as I worked. The anesthesiologist, Dr. Patterson, was manually ventilating the patient. The mechanical ventilator had died with the power. Every breath he gave her was by hand, watching her chest rise and fall in the phone-lit darkness. Time? I called out. 7 minutes since arrest, our circulating nurse responded. After 5 minutes, brain damage begins. At 10, survival chances dropped to nearly 0. That's when my resident noticed something bizarre. Dr. Shaw, look at this. In the dim light, the patient's heart tissue was behaving strangely. Despite being in arrest for over 7 minutes, it wasn't showing the typical signs of oxygen deprivation. It was almost as if, "Get me the manual bypass pump," I shouted. We kept one in the OR for training purposes. Completely mechanical, no power needed. It hadn't been used in actual surgery for decades. Dr. Wong looked at me like I was crazy, but he moved. The pump was essentially a sophisticated hand crank. Medieval medicine meets modern surgery, but right then, it was our only shot. We quickly connected it to the bypass circuit. 2 nurses took turns cranking, maintaining the blood flow through sheer muscle power. 10 minutes into the arrest, we were all drenched in sweat. The manual pump was working. Barely. The patient's tissues were getting perfusion, but her heart still wasn't beating. We needed a miracle, and we needed it fast. That's when Dr. Patterson made a call that would later be discussed in every major medical journal. "Give me the epinephrine, all of it." He wasn't talking about a normal dose. He wanted to dump enough epi into her system to restart a horse's heart. In the darkness, illuminated only by phone lights, we watched as he pushed the medication. The monitors, running on their last battery power, showed nothing for several agonizing seconds. Then, a blip. Another. Suddenly, a rhythm. But we weren't out of the woods. The power was still out, and we had a half-completed bypass surgery. The manual pump was buying us time, but we couldn't keep this up indefinitely. That's when we heard shouting from the hallway. The engineering team had discovered the problem. A construction crew working nearby had accidentally severed both main power lines and the backup circuits. They were bringing in emergency generators, but they'd take at least an hour to set up. We didn't have an hour. The manual pump team was exhausted, and our patient's new rhythm was unstable. We needed to complete this surgery, and we needed to do it now. Someone had the idea to bring in every portable light in the hospital. Soon, our OR looked like a camping expedition. Flashlights, headlamps, even the LED lights from the gift shop were pressed into service. Nurses from other departments formed a relay line, passing fresh batteries in as needed. Under this makeshift lighting, we continued the bypass. Every suture had to be perfect. In cardiac surgery, there's no margin for error. Dr. Wong's hands were steady as a rock as he helped me place the grafts. The scrub nurse anticipated every instrument we needed, passing them before we asked. 3 hours after the initial power failure, we were closing. The patient was stable, her new bypass grafts working perfectly. The manual pump team was replaced every 15 minutes, their arms shaking from exertion. Just as we placed the final suture, the lights blazed back to life. The silence in the OR was broken by exhausted laughter. We'd done it. Against all odds, with medieval techniques and modern medicine combined, we'd saved her. The monitors showed strong vital signs. Even the most experienced nurses were wiping tears from their eyes. Lisa Chen woke up 6 hours later. Apart from being a bit confused about why all her nurses had such sore arms, she was fine. Perfect cognitive function, no signs of damage from her prolonged arrest. When we told her what happened, she just smiled and said, "Sounds like quite a party." The case became legendary in our hospital. They changed all the backup power systems after that, installed triple redundancy. The manual bypass pump got a special display case in the hospital lobby, with a plaque telling the story. But the real impact wasn't about equipment or procedures. It was about remembering that sometimes the oldest solutions are the best ones. That human determination and creativity can overcome technology failures. That medicine isn't just about machines and monitors, it's about people working together, refusing to give up. Lisa sends us Christmas cards every year. Pictures of her kids, her family vacations, her new garden. Each one is a reminder that sometimes the impossible becomes possible, if you just keep the heart beating long enough. The younger surgeons ask me about that day sometimes. They want to know how we made the decision to use the manual pump, how we kept our cool in the darkness. I tell them the truth. We didn't have time to be scared. We were too busy proving that while technology can fail, the human spirit doesn't. Last month we had another power flicker during surgery. Nothing serious. The backups worked perfectly, but I saw every person in that OR stand a little straighter, ready to do whatever it took. Because now we know, when everything else fails, we won't. That's the real lesson from OR4. Not just about having backup plans for your backup plans, but about trusting in human ingenuity and determination. About remembering that sometimes, in the darkest moments, the most powerful force in medicine isn't the technology we use, but the people who refuse to give up. Lisa Chen's heart is still beating strong, and somewhere in our hospital storage, that manual pump sits ready. A reminder that miracles don't always need electricity. Sometimes they just need hands willing to keep cranking, eyes willing to peer through the darkness, and hearts willing to believe in impossible outcomes. Working flight trauma was never easy, But that call on the mountain changed my definition of impossible. As lead paramedic on Life Flight 6, I thought I'd seen everything. I was wrong. It came in at 3:47 a.m. Climber down on Mount Baker, severe trauma, possible internal bleeding. Weather was deteriorating fast, and ground rescue couldn't reach them. The patient's friend had managed one satellite phone call before the battery died. Coordinates placed them at 9,000 feet. Our pilot, Jack, looked at the weather radar and shook his head. Storm's coming in hard. We've got maybe 30 minutes before it hits. In emergency medicine, we talk about the golden hour, that crucial time after trauma where intervention matters most. Our patient had already burned through 45 minutes of it. The flight team was myself, Dr. Sarah Martinez, and Tom, our flight nurse. We'd worked together for 5 years, knew each other's moves before we made them. Good thing too, because this mission would test every bit of that synchronization. Lifting off, the helicopter's blades cut through pre-dawn darkness. The mountain loomed ahead, its peak already shrouded in clouds. Our patient's friend had managed to set off an emergency beacon, giving us a precise location. The problem wasn't finding them, it was reaching them. At 8,000 feet, the turbulence hit. The helicopter bucked like a wild horse. Through the night vision goggles, I could see the cloud bank rolling in faster than predicted. Jack's voice crackled over the intercom. 10 minutes, that's all I can give you. We spotted them on a narrow ledge, 2 tiny headlamps waving frantically. The ledge was barely wide enough for a skid landing. Jack would have to hold the helicopter in a partial hover, one skid touching, the other in open air. One gust of wind could send us into the mountain. Ready? Jack asked. We nodded. This was why we trained, why we drilled. Every movement had to be perfect. The alternative was unthinkable. The moment the skid touched down, Sarah and I were moving. The rotor wash created a mini blizzard of snow, but our NVGs cut through it. The patient was Lucas Chen, 28, experienced climber. His climbing partner had done everything right. Spinal immobilization, pressure on bleeding sites keeping him warm. But Lucas was in bad shape. Multiple fractures, rigid abdomen, dropping blood pressure. The fall had sent him tumbling 200 feet before the rope caught. The impact had done massive internal damage. BP 7040, pulse 130, Tom shouted over the rotor noise. Lucas was conscious, but barely. Every breath was a struggle. Through cracked lips, he whispered something about his wife being pregnant. Their first child. I pretended not to see Sarah's hands shake slightly as she started the IV. The wind was picking up. Jack's voice was tense. 5 minutes. Storm's moving faster. The helicopter shuddered against the mountain. We needed at least 7 minutes to stabilize and load. Sometimes mathematics and nature don't agree. Lucas crashed as we were transferring him to our stretcher. No pulse. Starting CPR at 9,000 feet, on a ledge barely wider than a kitchen table, with a storm bearing down. This wasn't in any training manual. Sarah took charge. Push the blood expander. Tom, get the IO drill. An intraosseous line would get us access directly through the bone when veins collapse. The drill whirred, then caught. Good flow. We pushed fluids, started massive transfusion protocol. 2 minutes of CPR. No response. The storm's leading edge hit us with a wall of snow. Jack's voice was urgent now. We have to go! Now! Sarah met my eyes. Standard protocol said we shouldn't move him during active CPR, but staying meant losing the helicopter, losing everyone. Sometimes you have to break rules to save lives. Load and go! The 3 of us moved as one, continuing compressions even as we lifted. The helicopter swayed dangerously as we brought him aboard. Jack lifted off just as the full force of the storm hit, the aircraft lurching sideways before he regained control. Inside, we were in our own world of controlled chaos. The cabin is tight for performing CPR, but we've practiced it countless times. Tom straddled the stretcher doing perfect compressions despite the turbulence. Sarah pushed medications while I managed the airway. 3 minutes in, we got a rhythm. Weak, but there. The monitor showed complex arrhythmias, his heart struggling to keep beating. The internal bleeding was getting worse. He needed surgery now, but the storm had closed in behind us. Our direct route to the trauma center was blocked. Jack came over the radio, taking the valley route, longer but safer. The valley route added 15 minutes. Lucas didn't have 15 minutes. That's when Sarah made another call that defied conventional wisdom. "We're going to do something experimental," she announced, pulling out a medication rarely used in trauma. It was a clotting factor usually reserved for operating rooms, not helicopters. The turbulence was so bad we could barely keep our balance, but Sarah's hands were steady as she administered the drug. We watched the monitors, holding our breath. Slowly, his pressure started to stabilize. 10 minutes out, Lucas opened his eyes, confused, in pain, but alive. He tried to speak, but the tube prevented it. I leaned close. "You're going to meet your baby, Lucas. Just stay with us." We landed at the trauma center in a blur of motion and shouted orders. The trauma team was waiting. As they rushed him to surgery, his last BP was 90/60. Not great, but survivable. We'd given him a chance. 16 hours later, we got the update. Multiple surgeries, massive transfusions, but he was stable. The experimental clotting factor had bought him enough time to reach definitive care. The trauma surgeon said another 5 minutes of bleeding and he wouldn't have made it. 3 months later, Lucas walked into our base. Still on crutches, but alive. His wife was with him, their baby bump obvious now. They'd found out it was a girl. They were naming her Sarah. That call changed us all. Jack added new protocols for storm approaches. The trauma center started stocking the clotting factor in their flight bags. Sarah published a paper on its use in pre-hospital care, but the real change was deeper. We'd pushed past what we thought was possible, found another level when failure wasn't an option. In flight trauma, we live for the golden hour. Sometimes, though, it's not about the time you have. It's about what you do with it. Lucas sends us ultrasound pictures of his daughter now. Each one is a reminder that the impossible is just the improbable in disguise. That sometimes when the storm is closing in and the clock is running down, you find strength you never knew you had. Because in that golden hour between life and death, when every second counts and nature itself is against you, the only thing that matters is refusing to give up. Even if it means rewriting the rules, one heartbeat at a time. The pediatric ICU has its own rhythm, its own language. As charge nurse of the night shift, I'd learned to read the subtle signs, the different tones of monitor alarms, the varying urgency in footsteps down the hall. But nothing had prepared me for what happened with the little girl in room 23. Maya Patel, age 7, had been admitted 3 weeks ago with a rare autoimmune condition. Her immune system was attacking her nerves, slowly paralyzing her from the feet up. We'd tried everything: plasmapheresis, immunoglobulins, steroids. Nothing seemed to work. That night started normally enough. Maya was stable, though weaker than the day before. Her mother had finally gone home to rest after staying awake for 4 days straight. I promised to call if anything changed. Around 2 a.m., Maya's primary nurse, James, called me over. "Something's wrong," he said. "Her numbers are fine, but she's different." In pediatrics, you learn to trust these instincts. Children can deteriorate in minutes, often with no warning signs. I went to check on Maya myself. She was awake, which was unusual for that hour. Her brown eyes followed me as I approached, but something about her gaze seemed distant, unfocused. The monitors showed normal vital signs. "Maya, honey, are you okay?" I asked, taking her small hand. It was then I noticed her fingers were moving. Just slightly, but they were moving. This shouldn't have been possible. Her latest neurological exam showed complete paralysis up to her chest. "I can hear them singing," she whispered. Her voice was hoarse from disuse. She hadn't spoken in days. "The butterflies, they're singing to me." James and I exchanged looks. Hallucinations weren't part of her condition. I checked her medication chart, nothing that should cause this. Her temperature was normal. Then her monitor started showing something bizarre. Her brainwave patterns were changing, becoming more organized, more intense. It was as if her neural activity was rebuilding itself. I called Dr. Reeves, our pediatric neurologist. While waiting for him, Maya continued talking about butterflies, her voice growing stronger. Her fingers were definitely moving more now, and incredibly, she was starting to wiggle her toes. "The butterflies say it's time to wake up," she said, with a clarity that sent chills down my spine. "They're fixing the broken strings." Dr. Reeves arrived just as Maya lifted her arm, her entire arm, something she hadn't done in weeks. He stood in the doorway, mouth open, watching as she moved limbs that had been paralyzed for nearly a month. "This is impossible," he muttered, rushing to examine her. The reflexes that had been absent for weeks were returning. Her muscle strength was improving before our eyes. It was like watching a wilted flower bloom in fast motion. By 4 a.m., the impossible continued. Maya was sitting up, something we'd been told she might never do again. Her brainwaves showed patterns typically seen in deep meditation, but her consciousness was crystal clear. She kept talking about butterflies weaving with light, fixing broken connections. We called her mother, who rushed in to find her daughter not only moving but attempting to stand. Mrs. Patel collapsed into a chair, tears streaming down her face as Maya reached for her with both arms. Arms that hours ago had been limp and useless. The night shift turned into morning, and news of Maya's miraculous recovery spread through the hospital. Specialists crowded into her room, watching in amazement as she demonstrated increasingly complex movements. Her muscle tone was returning, her reflexes strengthening. By noon, Maya was walking. Unsteady, requiring support, but walking. The butterflies, she said, had finished their work. When we asked her to explain more, she just smiled and said they had fixed the broken strings in her body with threads of light. The medical team was baffled. Repeat tests showed her immune system had somehow reset itself. The antibodies that had been attacking her nerves were gone. Her nerve conduction studies showed rapid regeneration that should have taken months or years, not hours. Dr. Reeves called colleagues worldwide. No one had seen anything like it. Maya's case would later be published in major medical journals, studied by researchers trying to understand this spontaneous healing. Some suggested it was a delayed response to our treatments. Others theorized about unprecedented neural plasticity or unknown immune mechanisms. Maya just smiled at all the theories, occasionally mentioning her butterfly friends who knew how to fix broken things. She went home a week later, skipping down the hospital corridor that had once seemed an impossible distance. Her case changed how we viewed recovery and healing. Sometimes it seemed the body knew secrets that medicine hadn't yet discovered. Years later, Maya became a doctor herself. She specialized in treating children with autoimmune disorders. In her office, she keeps a collection of butterfly artwork. When patients ask about them, she tells them that healing sometimes comes in mysterious ways, carried on butterfly wings. The PICU still has its rhythm, its language. But now we listen more carefully to our patients' whispers, especially in those quiet hours before dawn. Because sometimes in room 23 and beyond, impossible things happen. Children who shouldn't recover do. Butterflies dance in dreams, and healing comes in ways that science can't explain. Maya visits sometimes, bringing coffee and hope to our night shifts. She's healthy, strong, and still carries that same mysterious smile. The monitors in room 23 continue their steady beeping, telling stories of other children fighting their battles. And sometimes in the quietest hours, we remember the night when butterflies rewrote everything we thought we knew about healing. She left us with a gift greater than her recovery. She taught us that medicine isn't just about what we can explain. Sometimes it's about being witnesses to miracles, about listening to whispers of butterflies, about believing in healing that defies our understanding. Because in pediatrics, especially in those long night shifts, we learned that hope sometimes wears strange wings, and healing can come in ways that no textbook can teach. Maya's butterflies reminded us that every patient has their own path to recovery, even if that path is illuminated by nothing more than whispered songs and threads of light. The transplant unit has its own soundtrack. Beeping monitors, whirring machines, the soft squeak of nurses' shoes on polished floors. But what happened in room 4B that winter night added a completely different melody to our usual orchestra. I was the transplant coordinator on call when we got word about the donor heart. Perfect match for Daniel Rodriguez, a 19-year-old music student who'd been waiting for 6 months. His heart was failing from a rare genetic condition, and time was running out. The timing was cruel. It was the night of his senior recital at the conservatory. He'd been planning to perform from his hospital bed via video link, his violin being the one thing we still allowed him to hold onto. Now, instead of playing Tchaikovsky, he was being prepped for surgery. "Can I at least finish the first movement?" he asked, his violin still tucked under his chin. His heart was functioning at barely 15% capacity, but his fingers remained strong, elegant on the strings. Dr. Kim, our lead transplant surgeon, looked at his watch, then at the monitors. "You have 10 minutes, he said softly. "Make them count." What followed was something none of us were prepared for. Daniel closed his eyes and began to play. The music filled the unit. Not the tentative notes of a sick teenager, but something profound and powerful. Other patients opened their doors. Staff stopped in the hallways. His oxygen stats were dropping, but he played on. The violin sang of everything he couldn't say: his fear, his hope, his determination. As the final notes faded, his hands shook, but his smile was radiant. Then we were moving, rushing him to surgery. The transplant team was ready. Dr. Kim had performed hundreds of heart transplants, but something about this one felt different. As they opened Daniel's chest, his old heart still keeping its weak rhythm, someone noticed something extraordinary. The surgical team discovered that Daniel's failing heart was beating in perfect time with the Tchaikovsky piece he just played. Even under anesthesia, even as they prepared to remove it, his heart held onto that rhythm. The last song it would ever beat to. Dr. Kim had his own ritual before critical surgeries, a moment of complete silence to center himself. But this time, he did something unprecedented. "Play it," he said quietly. "Play the piece he was performing." One of the nurses pulled up the Tchaikovsky violin concerto on her phone. As the music filled the OR, something remarkable happened. The surgical team began moving in perfect synchronization, as if choreographed. Each incision, each suture, each careful movement matched the music's rhythm. The procedure to remove a failing heart and replace it with a donor organ is precisely timed. Too long and tissue starts to die. Too rushed and mistakes happen. But that night, the timing was perfect as a symphony. 4 hours in, during the most critical part of the surgery, Daniel's new heart wasn't responding as expected. This sometimes happens. The moment when a donor heart needs to start beating in its new home is always tense. Dr. Kim tried the usual protocols, but nothing worked. That's when Dr. Chen, our youngest resident, started humming the Tchaikovsky piece. Slowly, others joined in, the entire surgical team, humming in harmony while they worked. And then, like a conductor raising his baton, Daniel's new heart gave its first strong beat. The monitors came alive with a strong, steady rhythm. But here's what made the entire surgical team pause. The heart was beating in perfect time with the music. The same tempo as the piece Daniel had played hours earlier. "I've never seen anything like it," Dr. Kim would later say. "It was like the heart knew the song." Recovery from a heart transplant is grueling. Patients spend weeks in isolation, fighting against rejection, learning to trust this new organ in their chest. But Daniel's recovery was different. He healed faster than anyone expected, his new heart performing as if it had always been his. 2 weeks after surgery, still in his isolation room, Daniel asked for his violin. We hesitated. Movement restrictions are strict after transplant, but Dr. Kim gave his permission, understanding something the rest of us were just beginning to grasp. Daniel played softly at first, his fingers remembering their way. And as he played, his monitor showed something astonishing. His new heart was adapting its rhythm to match the music. Perfect synchronization between musician and organ. 6 months later, Daniel gave another recital. This time, not from a hospital bed, but on the conservatory stage. He played the Tchaikovsky piece he never finished that night. In the audience, our entire transplant team sat listening, some of us crying quietly as two hearts. The one that had failed him and the one that saved him were honored in the music. He added something new to the performance. Using recordings from his monitors, he incorporated the actual rhythm of both his hearts, the old one's fading tempo and the new one's strong beat, into the orchestration. The piece became a duet between man and medicine, between life and death, between what was lost and what was gained. Daniel still plays concerts, now professionally. He's become known for placing his hand over his chest while performing, feeling his heart keep time with the music. Sometimes he visits our transplant unit, violin in hand, playing for patients waiting for their own miracles. The transplant unit still has its regular soundtrack of beeps and whirs. But now sometimes in room 4B, late at night, nurses say they can hear the faint echo of violin music. A reminder that healing comes in many forms, and sometimes the strongest medicine isn't what we keep in our supply rooms, but what lives in the symphony of a beating heart. Daniel's case taught us something profound about the connection between music and medicine, between rhythm and healing. His donor heart didn't just save his life, it became part of his art, proving that sometimes the most powerful prescriptions are written not in pharmacology books but on sheet music. Every transplant coordinator has stories that stay with them. This one became mine. Because in room 4B, we learned that healing isn't just about surgical precision or medication schedules. Sometimes it's about finding the right rhythm, the perfect tempo, the exact moment when medicine becomes music, and a heart learns to beat to a brand new song.